Marvel's Avengers is a game that, unless you are the most ardent of fanboys, you would have to agree it has off to an exceptionally rocky start. It's a game that does have almost unlimited potential, and I find myself daydreaming on a daily basis about where the game could actually go and how awesome it could be, but at the moment there is a whole lot of work that needs to get done to actually get the game back on track. Now, in regards to the foundations of the game, which is the combat and how the characters play, I do feel that they have absolutely nailed it. All the characters, all 6 of them, have them all at maximum level and near enough 130 for your gear as well, and they all feel incredibly well to play, so that's a very important aspect that they have nailed. However, there's a lot of other aspects that they really haven't done well at all, and we need to see a lot of improvement on. Now, it's still very much early days, so I feel it's really important that we try and give as much constructive feedback as we can to Crystal Dynamics. It doesn't necessarily have to be positive feedback, it can be negative, but as long as it's actually constructive, and this is what this video is all about. I've spent a fair amount of time playing games of this nature, and I feel that I've picked up a lot about what works and what doesn't work. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to cover all the different changes that I feel would get Marvel's Avengers back on track. So these changes that I actually run through here, they're in no order of importance at all, and I'll also mention the fact that there's been a lot of discussion around the lack of endgame in the game at the moment and all the bugs, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse and discuss that further. That's 2 issues that we know that do need to be addressed, but these are issues I feel that would really help out the game. Now, something from a personal point of view that I noticed recently, and it's actually put me off using the marketplace, and for the long-term health of the game it's really important that people actually want to use the marketplace, is that a few weeks back I bought this costume for Black Widow. Looks absolutely fantastic, and then a week later what happened in the store is we had a slight recolouring variant of it come out for the same price. So the original costume worked out around about £7. This new recolouring was £7 as well, and I actually prefer the recolouring now, due to the fact that they're bringing out costumes in the marketplace, and then potentially later down the line they're bringing out a recolouring of exactly the same costume. That's made me exceptionally hesitant about buying any costumes in future, even if I do like them, because the potential is there. They may actually bring out a recolouring that does look better, and then I feel that I need to buy it again. So in regards to this, I feel that when you buy a base costume via the marketplace, that you should get all future recolourings, or the recolouring should come at a discounted price, perhaps maybe 50% off or maybe 66% off, something along the lines of that. It may not seem like a big issue, but again, for the long-term health of the game, we need to get people actually spending money in the marketplace. The next area that I feel really could do with a lot of improvement, this ties in with the first point, but again, the marketplace is exceptionally important, because if you want your free heroes and content going forward, Crystal Dynamics need to entice a portion of the player base to actually go in and spend money within this marketplace. Now, the 2 biggest issues I have is, one, the content that's actually been put there. What the hell is that for costume up the top right hand side? Who would actually pay for that when there are so many other iconic costumes out there? So we need to see more iconic ones. Yes, they're not going to put them all in the store straight away and then run out of costumes, but the costumes so far have been exceptionally lackluster. And then on top of that, you have the actual pricing as well. Now, to support the developers and the fact the game's been doing really well on the channel, the day it came out, I actually bought the highest pack in regards to buying units. So that was £100 I spent on the game looking to support the developers. And you can see I've got the vast majority of them, because I don't feel anything is actually worth buying at the moment, just because it doesn't look good or because I feel it is vastly overpriced. And that applies to the takedowns and the emotes. They need to come way down in price. Yes, I appreciate they may be trying to appeal to whales, but this isn't a mobile game. If you bring down the price of these takedowns and emotes, you're going to sell a whole lot more of them. You're going to make them impulse buys, and again, I'm actually sitting on a ton of credits at the moment and I just don't want to spend them, and that's not a good place to be. The next issue that I feel that they really need to get on top of sooner rather than later is in regards to how the saves actually work in the game. So generally, when you have a games as service style game, you'll have your saves being saved server side. So that means that generally you won't lose any data, and it makes it very hard for hacking of data to actually happen. And at the moment, the saves are stored locally, the way the game actually works. That allows players to play offline, but the downside of that is you can have hacking that actually go on relatively easy. I've seen this screenshot on Reddit today. So yes, that is a power level 510 4, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then on top of that as well, there's been numerous threads coming up on Reddit from players where their saves have actually been corrupted. And of course, when you have your server side saves, that can happen, but the frequency of it happening is exceptionally low, and it's much more likely it will happen when it's at a locally stored save. Let's say your PlayStation breaks, your PC breaks, that's it. You've lost all your progress, and if they want us to play in the game for years, that's really not a great thing to happen at all. So what I personally feel should happen going forward, this one could be quite divisive, but I feel that they need to say to players that either you play offline going forward, or you actually choose to play online, and once you go online, that's your account will be converted to an online account that you can only play online, but it means you shouldn't have any issues with actually losing your saves, and you're not going to run into any issues where you have a level 510 power 4 running around as well. The next change we have here is a relatively small quality of life change, but I do feel that a series of small quality of life changes can actually make a huge difference to a game. So at the moment I'm on my way to the science vendor to actually check out what he's got. It's a good 30-40 seconds to go to him. I then need to go all the way back to get to the map. Now yes, it does make the game very immersive. Yes, the helicarrier does look great, but to have to do this on a daily basis just isn't fun at all. So either I need to get these vendors moved so they are closer together, or we have to get them accessible via the in-game menu. Because again, yes, I can see that immersion argument, but from a gameplay perspective, this just simply isn't fun at all. Before Marvel's Avengers released, one of the areas that the developers talked about very often was the customization of characters, and how and the way the skill tree worked, that if you were to play for and then your friend was to play for, they would play and feel completely differently. Now I don't really agree that is the case at all, and it all comes down to your heroic abilities. Having free abilities at the moment simply isn't enough. I believe possibly that one of the developers has confirmed on stream that they are working on new abilities, and I really hope that's the case, because one, it will add variety to characters if you have more heroic abilities to actually choose from, but it will actually open up a lot of build options as well. So the idea I had in particular was, let's say for example you have an additional support ability for Black Widow. So in this instance it could be that you call in a shield medic to actually help your team, and then let's say for example you have an additional assault heroic as well, and that could be that you call in a shield strike perhaps from the helicarrier or one of the Quinjets. Now with your characters, if you were able to actually have a mixture of the types of heroic you have, so for example if you want to play a support style character, you could actually choose to have 3 different support abilities available, or if you want to be more of a DPS character, you could have 3 assault heroic abilities altogether as well, rather than having characters be almost a jack of all trade where they have to have a heroic, they have to have an ultimate, and they have to have an assault. Let us actually mix and match, and if we want to play a full support character or a full damage character, give players the agency to actually do that. The next area where the game is hugely lacking, and I feel this is probably one of the biggest problems at the moment, is in regards to the loot. It just doesn't feel satisfying to actually farm the loot in the game, and a large part of that is due to the fact that the loot, you've got the fact it's not cosmetic. I understand why it's not cosmetic. Marvel are exceptionally protective over how characters are actually displayed, but you have the issue that it's just not exciting when it drops, and it's not that game changing for your characters. You have, for example, this, which is an exotic. I've only had one in possibly around about 200 hours of playtime. 2 of the perks it has on it you would get on your normal legendaries, and the bottom perk is simply a stat increase. Now the gear needs to be more interesting, it needs to actually open up more build options. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what they could actually do, because to be honest, if I was to do this it would probably end up being an entire video talking about it. But they need to look at other games where the loot has worked and games where the loot hasn't worked, and they need to emulate to an extent the games where the loot has actually worked. So it looks like they've went down, as much as I hate the comparison, they've went down the Anthem route in regards to loot, whereas they should have went down the most recent version of, for example, Diablo, in regards to how loot works and how excited you can actually be when an impactful piece of gear actually drops. The next area that I feel where the game could be largely improved again is tying in with loot. So we've already discussed the fact that with your loot it feels underwhelming, but we have a huge problem with the RNG on loot. There's so many different variables and roles. If we look at this legendary piece, for example here, firstly you've got your stats that can show now stats. You can either have 2 or 3. You generally want a better spread, so you are looking for 3. You'll be looking for very specific stats. There's as many as 7 different stats in the game. Characters at most normally focus on round about 4 stats, so that means close to half of them won't really be relevant to you. And then you've got the perks. Now of course some pieces of gear will have 2 perks, some will have 3, but you've got the fact there seems to be a massive pool in regards to the number of perks that can actually drop on items as well. So what we really need, or what I feel we really need, is some form of crafting in the game. So if you get an item and it's really close to being a great item but it doesn't give you perhaps precision when you're actually running a range build, it gives you might instead, you can go in and you can use crafting resources to actually change that. Now the reason I'm mentioning this is over the last few days I've probably spent about 3 days farming the snowy tundra. I have a run that I do where I can get 21 chests in 7 minutes. I've got a video on that, so there's a shameless plug for that there. But I've been doing that for around about 3 days solid in Iron Man, to the point that my thumb's actually getting sore, and I've not had a single upgrade for them just due to the huge amount of RNG. There's been some pieces that have been really close to being an upgrade, and if I could tweak them ever so slightly, then they would be able to be an upgrade and it would feel much more satisfying. But with no system in place at the moment like that, it's just making the loot problem even worse. The next change we have is a pretty small one, but one that I do find really frustrating when I come across it. It's the spin enemies in game. So spin enemies are ones that actually completely reduce your heroic bar. Now some heroics, although with certain builds we can fill it quickly, but some heroics can actually take as long as 5 minutes to actually fill up, and it can take one hit from one of these enemies to actually reduce that to 0. It's simply not a fun mechanic at all, and in place of this, what I think would probably work pretty well, and it would make them still relatively dangerous, is if they added a silence of sorts, for example. So let's say if they stopped you from using your heroics for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, then you would have to be wary of them, but it just wouldn't feel as frustrating as the current mechanic they have in place. The next area where I feel the game could be massively improved is in regards to your companion AI. So at the moment there is a pretty large emphasis on solo content in the game. You've got your heroic hives and your mega hives that you can only run solo, so it's really pretty important that your AI is competent, and a lot of times recently I found they've actually not. In regards to reviving me, it's just not been happening recently. I don't know if that's a bug or not, but also I find very often they'll be using their heroics at the worst of time. You'll be perhaps just about finished a stage and there'll be one small minion left, and then they all start spamming their ultimate abilities, which is really frustrating. So it would be nice to have some kind of AI control. It could be pretty simple. For example, you tell the character, do you want them to play as more of a support character and stick next to you? Do you want them to be a defensive character and maybe taunt enemies when they're near you, or do you want them to be more offensive and run ahead of you? Something like that. Ideally what I would like, but I think it's exceptionally unlikely, is something like the original Dragon Age Origins, where you could actually set modifiers for how the AI works. So you could say, for example, if a character's health drops below a set amount, then Kamala would use her support ability. Something like that would be fantastic. I think it's highly doubtful, but it would be good to get some kind of control over the AI, because at the moment they just run about like headless chickens, really. The final suggestion I have here, and the fact this is a final suggestion isn't to say that this is all the suggestions that I feel would fix the game. There's a ton more, but these are just some ones that have actually came to me recently. But the final suggestion of something that I feel would work quite nice for your endgame players is the fact we've got the comic system in game, and it just doesn't feel fleshed out. It doesn't feel like it's been implemented that well. Now firstly, you've got the set bonuses. The fact you have to go over a different one to see the different set bonus, we should see them all added up so we can see how much we're actually getting from them. But in regards to your endgame players, and with the loot not feeling that impactful at the moment. Something I feel that would be really nice, and you would always feel like you were getting a sense of progression is, for example, once you hit level 50, any excess XP you get, that could be converted into a currency of sorts, and then that particular currency could be used to buy comics. Now the comics could be rotated, and then there's only certain comics that actually show up each day, so that way you wouldn't always just go for crit chance, for example, which is going to be one of the more powerful bonuses available there. But that way, if you're almost completed a set and you can see you're going to get a little stat bonus, you could look out for that comic to actually complete it, and then it would make you feel that at end game, even if you are having some bad RNG with your loot, like I've had for the last few days, you will at least be making some progress towards builds that you're wanting to do. You could be, for example, getting comics that increase your amount of healing you do, or comics that increase your damage, depending on the type of character you're actually wanting to build there. But that's all the suggestions that I've been able to come up with. As mentioned, I know there's a lot more areas where the game could actually be improved, but this is some that I've come up with. If you've actually got any ones, leave them in the comments below, and what I'll look to do is I'll look to pin them all as a pinned post, and I can even do a future video talking about all these changes that came from the community as well. But let me know what you think about these changes in the comments below, and can Marvel's Avengers pull it back from the pretty dodgy state it's in at the moment? I feel that they can, but they really need to get on top of things sooner rather than later. But again, let me know in the comments below, and thanks for tuning in, stay safe, and I'll see you all again soon.